I hear the printer go off in the back and it prints one page and it prints another page and another page. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. I didn't pass. I bet it's gonna be okay. And the proctor comes out with this stack of papers and she looks down at the papers and she looked at me and she looked down and she said, well, this is interesting. Hi friends, I'm Anna and I am a critical care register nurse and I have my CCRN certification in neonatal populations. I get so many questions at work as to what I did to study and how I prepared for the neonatal CCRN exam. And I remember when I took this test a few years ago that it was really hard to find information as to what specific people did to prepare for the exam. The accrediting body was really great about giving details as to, what kind of neonatal specific information was on the test, but I didn't really have anyone that I could ask to say, what did you do to study? What worked well? What paid off and you saw in the exam, or what really wasn't covered that much? And so I wanted to just do a video that talked a little bit about, one, the overview of the exam. What was it actually like taking the exam? What do you need to do to be qualified for the exam? And two, what I specifically did to study for the test. Resources I used, questions I used to practice, all that type of stuff. So I think this video will probably be 2 parts, and the next one I will dive more into the specifics of what I did to actually study. But let's start by talking about the exam itself and kind of an overview of the test. But before we get into that, I just want to throw out a very general disclaimer that I am not an expert in any of the content that we're going to talk about in the next video, or any of the specifics of the exam that we're going to talk about in this video. It's been a few years since I have taken that test, and I know that the format's changed. Probably a lot of people are taking it online with online proctors, and that's different from what I did. So just know that my heart in this is just to share my experience, but that may be completely different for you, and that will certainly be different from someone else who took this exact same exam. So I hope that you're able to use this along with other resources to study for and pass the neonatal CCRN exam. So to qualify to take the exam, there are several different options and hoops that you can jump through, if you will, but I worked in a NICU for 2 years, which is a pretty standard requirement. So after I hit that 2-year mark, I was able to sign up for the test. And pretty soon after hitting that 2-year mark, or right up before then, I knew I wanted to take this test. And so I had started studying then. Actually, going to take this test felt really similar to taking the NCLEX. I had to go to a different city and go to a testing center there. I got into the main room, the lobby area, and you have to put all your stuff up in a locker, and you couldn't even take in a tissue. So that was very NCLEX style. I walked back into the main testing area with all the computers, and they offered me little disposable earplugs, and they gave me some scratch paper and a pen, and then I logged in and just pretty much sat down and started answering questions. Again, it's been a few years, but if I remember correctly, I had probably about 130 to 140 questions, and I know that a ballpark of 20 of those were statistic questions, so ones that truly didn't count towards my score, but that they were going to look at to use officially at a later time. And I also had probably, again, 15 to 20 adult questions, and I would compare these to just your run-of-the-mill NCLEX questions, and I'm pretty sure that the reasoning behind adding these was just to see if you are a generally safe nurse. If you're a critical care register nurse, regardless of what area you're in, you need to be minimally competent to take care of anyone. So I bet that that's the logic in throwing those in there. But those were prioritization type questions, safety questions. I did not need any adult specific knowledge to answer them. And I wasn't really expecting those questions either. And so I was trying to remember all of my NCLEX tools like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and things like that. But I did have about 20 of those, and I needed to get 86 right to pass the test. I also think I had 3 hours to answer all of those questions and get that minimum amount right. I think it took me about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes to answer all those questions, which is a little bit slower for me. I'm a pretty fast test taker, but I wanted to make sure I was reading everything thoroughly and very methodically trying to go through and answer all of these questions. But I do remember that I wasn't stressed out about time at all, that, you know, you have your timer in the corner of the test, and that I was pretty pleased with how on track I was with time. But if you're a slower test taker, that's definitely something to consider. When I finished my exam, I went back to the lobby, and the big difference between this one and the NCLEX was that you are given your scores immediately and whether or not you passed. And I remember as soon as I first got there, first thing in the morning to take the test, I was in the lobby and there was a gal there who was taking her real estate exam, because it wasn't just a CCRN test. It was really anyone who needed to take a proctored, official, standardized test. So I was talking with her that morning, and she said, oh, you know, this is my second time taking my test. She's like, the last time I was here, there was someone taking the CCRN test, and she told me if they print off a bunch of pages, that's a bad sign. That means you didn't pass, because they're giving you all this extra information as to what you missed and what you can focus on next time. But she said, oh, you know, if they only print one page, then you're fine. It's just the sheet that you passed. So I was like, oh, good to know. So I remember after I took the test, I'm sitting there in the lobby just waiting, and I hear the printer go off in the back, and it prints one page, and it prints another page, and another page, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. I didn't pass. But it's gonna be okay. And the proctor comes out with this stack of papers, and she looks down at the papers, and she looked at me, and she looked down, and she said, well, this is interesting. She handed me my paper, and I had passed. My heart stopped there for a minute, but I had passed the test, and I was so relieved. So that was, in short, my experience physically taking the test and kind of an overview of what to expect on there. Again, as far as questions go, aside from those adult questions, about those 20 that I had, everything else was neonatal. There really wasn't a lot of cardiac stuff, I remember. And I also remember it being pretty difficult. They would give you a set of information, and from that you'd have to deduce this other set of information, and then you'd infer this, and then from that third step would be your actual answer set. So it was kind of tricky in that regard, because there were so many ways that I could mess up and get the wrong information. And I do remember talking with one of our neonatal nurse practitioners after I passed the exam, and she said, you know, oh wow, great for you. She said, that's a board exam. And she is board certified as a neonatal nurse practitioner. And I think what she meant in that is that nursing knowledge will only get you so far. Most of that test was very medical knowledge heavy, and you either knew the information or you didn't. There wasn't a whole lot that, at least what I remembered, is that there wasn't a whole lot I could do if I didn't know the information. I couldn't deduce the answer on a lot of those. I knew it or I didn't. So I don't want to say that to scare you or anything, but you do have to know your stuff for this test. And last thing I wanted to say is that I am so excited that you're watching this video, because that probably means that you're considering taking this exam. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that studying for and taking this test was one of the best things I have ever done for myself as a nurse, to grow my career as a nurse, to become a safer nurse. And I think a big reason for that was that I had done the steps for a few years, but then I was able to go back and fill in all those gaps with information. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What can I anticipate happening next? How can I talk with the provider about what I'm seeing in terms that they understand, because I truly know what's going on physiologically, for example, when I see X, Y, and Z. So I think that that was one of the biggest things that I have done in my career as a nurse to really grow. So if you are considering taking this exam, do it, study for it, take it. Again, in the next video, we'll go over all the specifics that of what I did to take the test, all the resources I'll use. I'll give you guys all of that information. But thank you for watching. And again, I just commend you for being interested in taking this test. It will grow you as a nurse in really amazing ways too.